Hey, Narath. Welcome
Hi, Heli.
to our Friday conversation this week at Make Time Flow. Let's talk about some of the interesting conversations that you've had this week with people in the Make Time Flow community. What's happening on the ground?
I always have tried in the platform and then for people's success stories, help them like it was an intense but good week because uh, and certainly how I think about starting my weekly success stories. But it has been an intense but a really good week. Uh, this was Memorial Day weekend, and so here in the US, it feels like the real kickoff for summer. And there was really sort of a wonderful vibe. It was also the return from 2 weeks traveling and thinking and flourishing in different places. So it was a good chance to sort of rethink some rhythms, and that's been surprising. So we talk a lot about in the platform about rituals, but I also think that rhythms are really useful. We don't yet talk a lot about it, but rituals have a little bit of ceremony to them. They are a moment when you enter into something. So to begin your workday well, ritual, I think, is something like that. The shutdown ritual, especially the weekly reflection and planning ritual at the end of the week, is one of those ones that deserves a little bit of ceremony. And especially the wrap one, where people don't realize, but you should prepare yourself for some cognitive effort in that time. It'll make your follow-up week much better, and it also helps you to close up that week much more effectively. But rhythms are another thing. Rhythms are sort of the once set up well, become just a default way to run your life, and you don't have to think about it as much. Some of the newer rhythms, I think, are these ones about when is the right time to work out. And this week, been experimenting a lot more with early morning workouts where consistency is much easier because of this physics of the day that I keep talking about. And committing to that is a really interesting one. Once you make the commitment, it's just much more straightforward, although following up on it can be hard. But setting it up as a rhythm where it's just that's what you do, you don't think about it, and then you flow through. But even when you do those, then finding ways to be more comfortable or make things easier can help a lot with it.
So this week, 5 a.m. wake up was the thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, I've been trying to be very thoughtful around this cognitive athlete approach. And as you know, one of the things that I've been working on this week has been really a cognitive high performance calculator, some way that people can quickly visualize, like design their time about how they're thinking of structuring their week, and then see what the cognitive energy would be like over the day based on it. I find that I try to do this calculus in my mind when I'm working with people, and then as I think about designing my own days. And one of my go-tos had been this idea of doing, this 4 to 6 hours of sort of max peak productivity work that you carve out time for, do some of your best work, and then how to reset. And one of the easiest ways to reset is to go out on these long walks in nature, like Darwin used to do, for 2 hours, processing all the things that he'd been working on in the morning and then coming back. And this idea that there was this real synthesis. Uh, don't yet have the capacity for that, but I had started to use workouts as a way to do that. And I would call it my going deep time, where I would just show up at the gym and then spend an hour and really not putting anything in my ears. The gym can be noisy, but just a chance to just sort of sit and process. And I could really feel it, right? On the days where I'd prepared well and done really good deep work, it's really high performance time, but not effortful in the way that people think. And it's tremendously freeing. Like I could feel it unlock energy for myself. So it was
Mhm.
hard to let go of that. But the physics of the day kept winning a little bit, where, I mean, there's momentum and there's entropy in your days. And the momentum part is, as Daniel Kahneman has shown, because we're optimistic planners, we start out with fewer tasks, but the tasks, we don't always complete in the right amount of time. And so they carry over a little bit, and those collect during the day, creating this momentum. And so that by the end of the day, many of us are feeling like, "Oh, I'm so overwhelmed with it." Key techniques for helping to deal with that are the X factor, helping yourself overcome some of the optimistic planning fallacy that we all fall prey to, and then using buffer blocks or flex blocks, and really committing to putting those in your day. It's something you have to continually recommit to, but like I often tell people, you finish between 20 and 40% of the tasks you almost get done if you have enough flex time. During times of a lot of uncertainty or where you have to be more responsiveness, having much bigger flex blocks can make you much more effective during those times. It's one of the best ways I've seen for people to control a little bit of chaos. But In addition to those, I think about like when to take the block time. And if you take that block, you can have a little bit of a second peak. But if you don't take that block, your performance just decreases over the time during the day. Committing to the 5 a.m. block has been a little bit of a different one this week, but it's been really satisfying because you get to start the day having done something hard already. And I've been delighted to see how long the days are. And then I get to use my performance break really as trying to do more of either the nappuccino or taking a walk.
You've switched it to 5 a.m. wake up, gym from 5:30 to 7:30,
Yeah,
and then back and in your at your desk at by like 8 a.m. or so.
yeah.
Right? The afternoons are now more the nappuccino, taking a quick power break.
And
Power
then
nap.
that physics of the day doesn't defeat me as it has sometimes. I think at least, it seems to be that consistency is much better when it's first thing in the morning because you have fewer of those demands. Later on the day, it takes a real effort to put tools down, go and
Yeah.
take your break to try to reclaim that second window. And 20 to 40% of the time, you are either getting delayed or you're unable to do it. So you have much higher consistency because of that momentum. The other big one is entropy. And by entropy, I'm co-opting these physics terms, but the idea is it's not just you with your tasks and activities, but the longer the day goes on, more people are interested in reaching out in that chaotic way, creating this entropy in your ability to control your time. So those two things together have really changed for me how I think about chronotypes in general for people. And in the experiments that I've done for myself and working with others, people ask me when's the best time to do deep work, and for the vast majority of people, if you want to do consistent deep work, it needs to be at a time that aligns with the physics of the day, right? Which is going to be earlier in the morning for you. When we work with people to think about team norms, a simple way to try to start that is that concept of not taking meetings before 10 a.m. and not after 4. Before 10, then people can often get like a 1 or 2 hour deep work block that can be very satisfying. That can be very helpful. Even better if you can extend those out or get rid of the standing meetings, but still have the feeling of team cohesion. Not after 4 as much as you can when you work in the same time zone, because then people have the time to have that flex block that will make them 20 to 40% more effective at completing things and then give them time for an effective shutdown. Being far more communicative with you about the main asks and being clear with you about what they're hoping for from your day and when to communicate back with them. So,
So these are all
yeah.
things that came up this week with clients working with team norms, especially for globally distributed teams. Did
The,
you have some tips for working
yeah,
with
I think
people in different time zones?
it's tremendous advantages and then many challenges. They can be very specific to the situations of what's needed. When you're having like all-on availability of responsiveness for teams, I think there are some specific things you need to do to make the team responsive and not individuals, because that's a strategy for burnout when there's cross time zones. But you can really have highly effective coverage, across large amounts of time at periods of time that could still give people some chance to do deep work and then still be the point person on call for those periods of time. So that can be a real advantage. It can be a real disadvantage when you're trying to coordinate people at different time zones when the overlap period is very tight. And that overlap period, unfortunately, is almost always when it's late in the day for somebody and then early in the morning for somebody else. And that's really challenging. It's hard without resetting a little bit to start your day with a deluge of things from some of the people who are coming to you. But it's also a great advantage. Lots of things are happening and then you can hand off, provided there's sort of this effective handoff strategy. I think, and also for people to end the day by doing these like massive, you know, the details of everything they've done, it's hard to reset it to a level where you can prepare people to be effective. I would say that the Project Aristotle work from Google and this idea of teams having higher than average social sensitivity and this ability to that everybody talks almost the same time, that can really apply. And especially if you have a concept of human flourishing, the ability to connect with people, having this opportunity to talk, and then this feeling of where they are in their day and the social sensitivity to like, hey, you're just getting started. This ability, can I welcome you? How do I prepare you for success? Like that would be a lovely way to start, as opposed to, hey, let me dump all this stuff on you and show you how much I've gotten done while you slept, is a lousy way to start. At the same time, the other person receiving it could be like, wow, there's this person, They're really interested in my flourishing. They're helping me to prepare for a great day. And they've done all this amazing work. I want to recognize the work that they've done and be grateful for it, and then help them to shut down and rest well and prepare for a great day tomorrow.
The cognitive athlete metaphor fits well there. It's like being on a relay team.
Right.
You run up, you hand over the baton, you stop, they keep going. So
Yeah,
global
yeah.
teams, cognitive high
I like
performance.
it a lot because then the person there who's done this like really good set is like they get to rest, they get to cheer on their teammate, the other teammate feels the support and then does their best for that particular part. Yeah, I like it.
So great. So that's been some of the conversations with community and clients this week. What have you been working on? I know you're working on some big things, so I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. I think it's a wonderful thing about like the approach in MakeTimeFlow is all the people working in MakeTimeFlow, part of our cognitive high performance is the MakeTimeFlow work. And so I really appreciate that. I have been working on not a new approach, just an articulated approach for how we're trying to build a really evidence-based platform that integrates the best of AI, but yet also goes beyond what's there. And how do I think about that? So I think about having to define these four main mind blocks, which is reading the scientific literature in a space, then writing about it, right? Trying to do the work to synthesize it into not just a massive plethora of read all these papers, right? Or use this technique from this one paper and that other one. Yeah, that sometimes happens, but it's much more helpful to say, can you create a cohesive framework? These are not great for blog posts. And I think that, Heli, you'll agree, like my default is to try to really do some rigorous self-critique as I try to synthesize and write these pieces. Yes, they end up being more foundational articles. Appreciate anybody who reads them thoroughly. I don't expect the majority of value to come from people necessarily reading these, but they're a forced discipline that forces me to try to be as consistent as possible. And then I can create derivative, shorter blog pieces, but be confident that I'm not just over extrapolating, but I've done the work to try to make sure that it's part of a cohesive whole and not just a series of one-offs, but like that it's cohesively thought out and that it tries to balance in what we know from the scientific literature, which sadly is not always very clear, right? It's often got some studies that support one thing and not the other, and you're trying to balance those because ultimately, after the writing, I want to turn it into actionable tools wherever I can. Sometimes, sure, it's just that we need to talk to people and share techniques, things that they may choose to try on. Um, but even more powerful, I think, than the books and techniques are the possibility to use these amazing powers of software and hardware and smart things to create tools that people can use in their daily lives. And that's the approach we take in the MakeTimeFlow platform. So read, write, build. And then the follow-up one, which I want to do much better for the people who are trying out the MakeTimeFlow platform. We as a team think a lot about how is this going to feel for somebody using this platform. Yes, there's certainly parts of the platform that are overwhelming. And yes, I'm sorry, real life tasking and real lives are rich and detailed and nuanced and not as simple as all of the productivity gurus often would have us believe that the simple thing could apply to. But how it feels matters a lot for us. And then accompanying people with it. So as you know, someone on the team will often, when people are onboarding, will reach out and then we'll offer to do some short accompaniment with them. Yes, because the platform is deep and complex, but also because we want to do the contextual inquiry of like there's so many different parts of the tools that they could be using, and we want to make sure that they're using the ones that help them move forward in life as quickly as possible. The win is not for people to use the platform as I'm using it, where like I know about each of the different tools, I know the values, and I tend to use all of them to some degree. You don't have to win by doing it the same way I do. I think if you choose a few things that really help move you forward in life, especially in an aligned way, helping you to explore a little bit about what matters to you, and then aligning how you manage your time and your attention to helping you move forward what matters most to you, that's the win. It doesn't have to be all the techniques. For some people, it's been learning just a few techniques, doing one or two of the tools, and that's a real one. So that framework is read the literature, write to try to integrate it, build tools that are effective, and then feel. How do people feel and experience it is the approach that we're using. In this context, I think that I've been going through three major areas that I am exploring, and I'm in the midst of the second one. I would say that the first major area was sort of thinking through what cognitive science has to teach us about how to work well with AI. I'm seeing a lot of people get more burned out with AI because it makes the easier things easier and the harder things harder. And people don't realize that to work effectively, especially with these massive parallel agent architectures, you have to be really ready for reviewing incredibly complex things again and again throughout the day. And many people haven't yet built up the tools and techniques to do that. And so they're ending up way more exhausted at the end of the days. And how do they deal with that? Are there approaches that you can use to deal with it well? And are there approaches that really don't work well? That was a sort of some of the early major piece, and we're starting to do some release of that. And it's been transformative for how I approach my work with AI, even as the tools get more powerful. And it's approached how I work with the team, and now how I'm advising. There are a few really fun sort of key techniques that make working in this deep pairing way that I've found has really been helpful, that you have to take advantage of. We'll dive into this in another one. There are really just two little things. One's in MakeTimeFlow, the other one is something you need in the real world. The focus this week, though, has really, and for the last week as well, has been learning a lot about the science of goal setting. We care a lot about this aligned action framework, and part of this was named goals. So in the platform today, you go and set your goals, and then I've tried to base it on some of the research. Friedman's work on four-way wins as a helpful way to help people think in a slightly more multi-dimensional way, and then I still think of the drivers of flourishing that we try to help people think about, and then integrate those into these success stories in the platform, but still called them very much goals. And I wanted to know, we're told about SMART goals, and we say you should set goals, and it seems like there's no alternative. So what do we know about goals? How strong is the evidence for its benefits? And are there any real alternatives? And it turns out that there is an incredible literature, right? We have over 5 decades of studies on goals and goal setting. There's goal setting theory. There have been other alternative theories, some of which seem to have been disproven, but there are other approaches to it. In addition, there is some strong evidence about the benefits of goal setting versus do your best approaches in simple tasks, in which you have the appropriate feedback and you have the skills necessary to do it in the right environment. You're like, great, goals really effective there. But in a whole bunch of places, including complex goals, which I argue are some of the most important, goals can be worse than just saying do your best. But there are a few things that are even better, and there's some very exciting stuff that's come out about approaches that entrepreneurs can use, in which you flip over the causal logic of I need to make an effective plan in order to understand all the steps to get to this outcome, versus another approach in which you function on the strengths you have and you keep control, and you choose from a plethora of potential outcomes that you could go, and moving in a very general direction of how you're doing it. This concept of effectuation, so which we'll dive into later. And it's been transformative for me, and I think transformative inside the platform. I'm rebuilding the goals system into much more deeply this concept of stories, and the framework really must be the aligned action, right? So if goals are not always going to be appropriate in the different ones, sometimes you can choose values or aspirations or an approach. But then there are times when goals are very effective. We know that narratives can be much more empowering and overcome many of the limitations, but there are also powerful things with moderate to strong effects, including mental contrasting and implementation intentions. And then there are the real harms of the simplistic visualizations that are sometimes promoted, and I think the term in the evidence bases, at least, that positive fantasy can do real harms to people and make them much less likely to achieve the outcomes they're doing when they don't combine it with the other things that lead them to no longer be positive fantasies, but actual plans to achieve outcomes that you can feel, but that you're able to deal with the problems that you can face.
It's such a fascinating topic. I think a lot of people will want to know, when is goal setting harmful, and when are other types of aspiration or visualization? Is that something that we could talk
There's a
about
wonderful
here?
article coming out soon about the different areas and how you can different approaches. So I'm going to defer to there because it's really worth spending some of the time. I would say that the best summary actually came from the leaders of goal setting theory. And a specific challenging goal in the right environment, getting appropriate feedback, and you have the skills to execute it, those goals beat do your best. There's very strong evidence for that. So you have both specific and challenging goals are much better than easy goals. People go much further. But you need the moderators. Like if the moderators are not there, then you're not going to be as effective. And there are true boundary conditions. The key one is that If it's a complex task in which you don't know how you're going to do it, choosing specific and challenging goals can make it much worse for you. And some of the mechanisms by which it makes it worse for you is that you get tunnel vision, you focus on only solving that thing. It creates tremendous stressors. We've even seen that when supervisors are handed down goals that they don't believe are possible, it can increase the abusive behavior of them to their employees. I think people do that to themselves as
Mm.
well. In those settings, one of the key differentiators is to go away from performance goals and move more into a learning goal framework. And the learning goals, again, there, if you can set specific and challenging learning objectives, then they can be much more helpful. But this goal is you reset control. You don't try to do this thing that you don't yet know how to do. You try to figure out ways to do that thing, right? I think that aligns a little bit with sort of how effectuation thinks about it. My summary around effectuation is one of the best examples of showing the differences between these two levels of control are it's not clear if it's going to rain. But if you just take an umbrella with you, then you have control over your ability to function well with whether or not it rains. So, so that's the one where you use the strengths that you have to reduce your inability to control certain situations, but still let you move forward in an appropriate direction. So I'd say that my main takeaway is in complex areas in which you're not sure if you have the supports necessary or you don't yet know how to do things, frame it either as like a strengths development. My main goal is to figure out how to get there, or frame it as specific learning goals, and then avoid performance goals. And it's really important for leaders in organizations to understand this because their great wish is to drive outcomes, but they can do real harms in their organization, especially in the way that the managers underneath them will treat their employees and won't advance their ability to de-risk figuring out how to get there. Knowing where you are in those two things can be critically important because if you do explore a number of ways and find a way to say, like, this is how we're going to, say, acquire 10 new users, and you figure out a way that works, then you can set performance goals to say, well, just make the pressing the lever more effective, right? What do you need to make that? But if you are demanding that people do things that they don't yet know how to do, goal setting can be very harmful.
The article will offer some practicable techniques, and then those will also be integrated into the MakeTimeFlow platform as part of the goal
Yeah.
setting tool, planning, and the aligned action framework.
We're also thinking very hard about how to integrate AI well, because the approach with MakeTimeFlow has been to be very thoughtful about how we think about integrating it, because there are many things where AI can make your mind weaker, right? Where it just does things for you, then your mind is smart and knows that it's energy intensive to learn things or figure out how to do things, and it can outsource that, and so it never learns it. But effectively, you're weakening your ability to do that thing. We're trying to use it in a way such that we don't use it in certain situations where we're trying to help people amplify their executive functioning and their executive control, because that's something that is useful everywhere in life, and that your innate natural intelligence that is constantly problem solving, relearning, and then experiencing this experiential world with this rich history that you have, that's worth keeping strong, right? Your life is going to be much better if you keep that strong. If you outsource that and your ability to make effective choices become weaker and weaker, you're not set up for success. So we're especially trying to be mindful about how to do this within the MakeTimeFlow system so that it's not just defining for you what matters most to you. How do you help people explore what matters most to them with a helpful guide and assistant, as opposed to just outsourcing it so that people don't actually think about it? Because I think AI will try for you and write something compelling, but if you don't do some of the work to really explore and understand all of these conflicting and competing ideas and thoughts that you have, you could choose a path, but it won't have any of the nuance of what you're capable of, right, in doing it. So I'm trying to be very thoughtful about that. Yes, some of it will involve like a 15-minute video where I'm trying to help guide people to do some kind of big thinking in the real world, right, with big pieces of paper, and then use their verbal reasoning to help share it and create a shareable way. And only then start to bring in this new goal, this new understanding of aligned action framework and the goal setting and the cognitive science and the human flourishing to help people flesh out really robust, beautifully written, inspiring narrative stories that can help guide and inspire them in life. That's the ultimate goal. But also to be very thoughtful about not letting AI take over and define things for people, keeping
So
them.
AI guided, high quality human intelligence.
Yeah, but
Human
human driven.
driven. Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, we're at time. So that's,
Okay.
thank you for the summary. And
All right.
I'll see you next week.
Wonderful. Thanks for the discussion. Keep in flow, everyone. Bye.